sure we've got everyone in here. Make sure we've got everything set up the way we need. And it looks like, all right, thank you for that information. So yeah, as previously said, my name is Stephen Cooper, and I'll be taking over to moderate this section. For those of you just tuning in, this forum is hosted by the Associated Students of Western Washington University's Office of Civic Engagement, and the goal is to activate students towards becoming more informed and involved participants in the political system. For everyone here live, you can submit additional questions that will be answered towards the end of the section. There's a Q&A button down towards the bottom. And so this segment of the forum is for the position of State Legislative Representative for Districts 40 and 42. And I'll be speaking with candidates Alex Ramel, Russ Dzialo, Sharon Shewmake, and Alicia Rule. I was notified Alicia Rule is running just a little bit late. But yeah, while we do that, I'll go ahead and give the other candidates time for their introduction statements. And hopefully as we get through those, Alicia can hop in. So we'll go ahead and start off with Alex Ramel. Thank you for joining us. You have 90 seconds here.
7.
And I'll give me just 1 second, and I'll go ahead and share my timer so you can see that. There we go. All right, and go ahead.
Thanks, Stefan. And thanks to the Associated Students. I really appreciate your work in pulling this together. And I don't think we could underestimate the importance of the student vote in this coming election. My name is Alex Ramel. I'm a single dad. I'm a community organizer, and I'm an unflinching Democrat. I was appointed this last January to represent the 40th district. And I stepped into that role with a commitment to being a leader who listens, collaborates, and who's ready to work with everyone. Look, there's a lot we've got to do this coming year, but I'll give you just a taste of a few of my priorities. We have to rebuild our economy to put people first. That means public health is our foundation. We have to protect our essential services in the budget. And as we're rebuilding, the jobs that we're creating need to be good jobs. Number 2, we've got to confront the climate crisis. We're already creating it. We need to confront the climate crisis and move rapidly away from the dirty energy of the last century and replace it with clean energy. Number 3, we've got to confront our housing crisis. We need to build more homes that people can afford and keep them affordable permanently. And in these areas and in everything else we're doing, we have to make justice and racial equity part of everything that we're doing. I'm really grateful for the strong show of support that I had in the primary, and for all of the trust that folks have put in me to lead our community in this difficult time. Asking for your support today to send me back to continue to represent our community's values in Olympia.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. Dzialo, you are next. Go ahead with 90 seconds with your introductory statement.
All right, thanks again for hosting this forum. I agree with my opponent that the youth vote is definitely an important segment as our probably our newest voters and our youngest voters and the future of our society. I'm running for state representative as a Republican. I bring to the table with a wide range of skills and abilities, a degree in business, and experience working in business and hiring, and unfortunately having to let people go. That's probably the most heartbreaking experience of my life, is to having to let employees go that were good employees, but we no longer could afford them because of increasing costs. So we absolutely need to take care of environment, but we can't throw our economy out as we do that. So we need to make sure we maintain efficient, low-cost energy. We need to help our housing availability and affordability, not just for renters, but also for home buyers. Whereas many of you, as you graduate college and start careers, will be looking to purchase a home. And wouldn't it be nice if you could stay here in beautiful Whatcom County or Skagit County or San Juan County? That's part of the 40th district. But our housing prices are getting out of control. So I ask for your confidence and vote in helping to rethink the way we've been thinking in Washington State for a year and bring more of a conservative base to our community.
Thank you for that, Mr. Dzialo. We'll go ahead and go with Ms. Shewmake. You have 90 seconds for your introductory statement. It seems that you're still muted, actually.
Yes.
There we go. I'll go ahead and restart your time.
Thank you so much. I'm Sharon Shewmake. I teach here at Western, I guess literally here in our spare bedroom in the little closet that I joke that my family put me in when I went to Olympia. But I also usually on campus. So I'm an economist. I teach environmental economics. I teach intro to micro. I teach urban economics. And sometimes I also teach energy policy courses. And I want to say that one of the things that inspired me to run was Western students themselves. When I teach environmental economics, I love teaching it because it has solutions to environmental problems. You take other environmental classes and this is going to go wrong, that's going to go wrong. Environmental economics says that, well, what we need to do is we need to price pollution. And so I teach this whole class centered around how do we price carbon pollution? How do we solve climate change? And then I felt like I did my duty, but my students actually went out and they started talking to people about it and they started lobbying for an initiative. That made me realize that I needed to do more than just come up with elegant solutions in front of a whiteboard. I work on agricultural issues. I work on environmental issues. A big thing that I also work on is ensuring that kids have access to preschool. It's a good deal for kids. It's a good deal for taxpayers. This year, however, is going to be all about economic recovery. And I want to make sure that we have a recovery that doesn't leave people behind and that sets us up for better economic growth in the future. And Alicia is here. She just isn't getting the link to work. So let me make sure we get her the right link, or if you want to jump back to her, I can get it to her.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. I'll see if I can get the link to her.
Yes.
Or if my co-moderator can, one of us.
I am currently working on it.
Fantastic. So I'll give it just a second. Hopefully she can pop in right at the end here.
I will text her. We're getting you the link. We had an interview on Latino radio just before this. So we were both going back quickly to our offices.
So I would go ahead and move on for right now, and I'll work to get Ms. Rule into the chat.
All right, thank you. So we will go ahead and jump to the first question. And the order for this question is going to be Mr. Ramel, Mr. Dzialo, and then Ms. Shewmake. It will rotate per question, and I can reread the question for you guys if you need. But starting with you, Mr. Ramel, what will you do at the state level to address climate change? And you'll have 90 seconds for this question as well.
Thanks. You want me to go ahead and get started now? Great. So I will just tell you the confronting climate crisis is the reason I'm interested in being a state representative. This is why I ran. In 2017, when the smoke from the wildfires covered our city, my son got sick, and you listen to your kid cough in the middle of the night for, in that case, weeks. It just changes the way that you think about it, and it gave me a sense of increased urgency. So we need to step up and do more on climate change. When I joined the legislature, one of my priorities was to join the state's Energy Strategy Advisory Task Force. And I can tell you that the good news is that we know how to solve this problem. We have the technical resources to make our electricity sector cleaner, to clean our transportation and building sectors. We know how to do it. We know it's a great opportunity to create jobs. It's just whether we have the political will. So I'm committed to making the answer to that question yes. So in the next coming legislative session, we need to put a price on carbon pollution. We need to pass a low carbon fuel standard, and we need to begin figuring out how are we going to unwind our dependence on fossil gas to heat and cool our buildings. So it's probably not surprising, but I would add that I'm also endorsed by the Washington Conservation Voters and the Sierra Club.
Thank you for that, Mr. Ramel. Mr. Dzialo, same question to you. What work will you do at the state level to address climate change? And you have 90 seconds.
So I will start by saying I'm a climate thinker, not a climate catastrophist as most Democrats tend to be. We do need to combat climate change, but we need to do it without costing increases in our energy costs. So solar and wind are great supplemental energy sources if you have the ability to put them and install them on your personal house. But I don't think I would trust a hospital powered by that technology at this point. We have dense energy material that is available and a lot less expensive that we can use. With the pandemic, more and more companies have started telecommuting, and that's gotten emissions down as well, with less and less people driving, making more use of telecommuting and mass transit. So we definitely, I want to reemphasize, we need to rethink, and putting a price on it just increases the cost for everybody, and not just even renters. You pay for, you may not pay for all those costs, but you're going to pay for it in lost opportunity. And so we can have a greener future. The free market is already going that way. Think Elon Musk. He didn't say, "Where's my handout?" He went and did it, and he's making a better technology, cleaner technology than the government can ever do by throwing money there. But right now, we need to protect our healthcare and jobs without just throwing money away.
Thank you for that, Mr. Dzialo. And Ms. Shewmake, finally, same question to you. What work will you do at the state level to address climate change?
Yeah, so at the national and international level, we have to put a price on carbon. This used to be the Republican idea, by the way. It isn't some like liberal idea. George H.W. Bush came very close to putting a price on carbon through a series of energy taxes that would have gotten us to a green future. It's just a few lobbyists came through and realized that it was frankly cheaper to pretend it doesn't exist and that they could make a lot more money that way. I think that was a really big problem. I think we got to stop lying to people about the impacts of tobacco. It's the same story now that we're using the same tricks that we used on tobacco, or that people used on tobacco, to talk about climate change. And that's wrong. It's morally wrong. It's scientifically wrong. Putting a price on pollution is the single most cost-effective way to deal with climate change. The reason we pollute too much is because polluting is free. If you get your labor for free, you're probably going to use too much labor, right? Who hasn't been to a buffet restaurant and everything's free and you eat too much? So we have to think about putting that price on pollution. And where we've fought as a state is, well, how do we spend the revenues? And as a politician, I get that now, but as an economist, I never used to really understand it, because the point of a carbon tax isn't the money that you bring in. It's putting fossil fuels on an even footing with green fuels, because fossil fuels are releasing damages to the economy, and we're paying for that. We're just paying for it indirectly, and you may not see it. And so we have to make sure that they're paying the full costs of what they're doing. And we can do all sorts of things like a recovery bond, or even rebating some of that revenue.
Thank you so much for y'all's input on that question. We'll go ahead and jump to the next one, which is, what actions will you take to address the massive college debt that students face in our state? And we'll begin with Mr. Dzialo.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. So we're doing the. I'm sorry. What was that question again? I was just kind of caught off guard.
Oh, not a problem. So the question was, what actions will you take to address the massive college debt that students in our state face?
So student debt is an important thing to challenge, and I think we need to look at the cost of what it takes to go. So our professors are getting huge salaries. Our college universities have large endowment funds, which is, an endowment is usually money that's set aside to ensure the financial stability of the institution. Some of these institutions took millions of dollars from the CARES Act. So that's money that could have gone to help people that actually needed it. So and Republicans and Democrats have been doing good work to lower the price of textbooks. I think having e-textbooks available will additionally lower the price of textbooks. There is a cost to that. I think my college education was expensive, but it was an investment in myself. There's a number of federal programs available to help pay that off and work that out, get forgiven by depending on what jobs you go to. So it is kind of a personal choice. You weigh, how much is it going to cost, and how much do I need this education to further my career and how much it's going to benefit me and my family. And it's something you take personally onto you, and you use the government. There's federal level programs that are available that isn't something we can solve on a state level, but our state has done a good job of lower tuition and textbooks. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Ms. Shewmake, same question to you. What actions will you take to address the massive college debt students in our state face?
Yeah, so first of all, the reason that we're seeing increases in the price of college isn't because of college professor salaries. It's partially because we're seeing an increase in administrative costs. Just in case you're wondering, first of all, you can look up all our professor salaries online. It's public information at Western. But college professors are paid competitively based on what they could get at an outside job. So accounting professors are paid more, programming professors are paid more than people who don't have as many outside options. We can debate whether or not that's fair, but it's how the system is. I would make more money if I went to an economic consulting job, but I love teaching at Western. I love doing research at Western. It's really fulfilling work. So if we did want to talk about lowering tuition prices, two things that are two kind of macro trends. One is we are seeing an increase in administration. And so I do think that we need to look carefully at college administrators. Another thing too is that state governments used to put more into four-year and community and technical colleges than they do now. And so acknowledging that the fact that, you know, you go to UW by working a summer job at minimum wage for a few months and pay for your tuition. Well, that was a different time when we saw a lot more contributions from state budgets. And so that we need to still think through that. And so when we look at the economic impacts of a college education, we see that it's not just good for the people that get a college education, but also for the people around them. That if you want to bring technical jobs to Washington State that pay a whole lot of money, well, then you need a trained workforce that can do that work. And so ensuring that we have that workforce is kind of, we talk about this as a positive externality, that when we have trained people working around, they make other people more productive. This is an economic policy. And ensuring that everyone that's talented and that wants to go to college can go to college if that's what they want to do, no matter how much money their parents make. This is also a good economic policy, because that means that we're getting talented people who might be the next Elon Musk, they might be the next inventor of something new and cool. It means that we're allowed to develop that talent. And something I always say, I used to say as an economist, and I still say as a politician, is the most valuable thing in our society is not gold, it's not land, it's people and their talents. And so when we fail to invest in people, whether that's college students, whether that's preschool students, whether that's someone who wants to do an apprenticeship or take an ulterior route, then we're missing out on economic opportunities.
Thank you so much. Mr. Ramel, same question to you. What actions, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, what actions will you take to address the massive college debt that our students in our state face?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just heard a big part of the reason why I like working with Representative Sharon Shewmake so much. You know, we were both able to vote this last year to pass funding for the Workforce Investment Act to keep the Washington College Promise. What that means is students from low-income families are going to have access to fully funded state need grants. Students from lower and middle-income families are going to have access to partial state need grants. So we can eliminate the need to take on much of that debt. But it also is going to mean not balancing our state's budget on the backs of our students. My opponents made a commitment not to raise taxes, and that means in a tight budget year, we're going to be looking for cuts. And if we follow the pattern in the last recession, a lot of those cuts end up being cuts to our state schools, and that means increases in tuition and more college debt. So I'm committed to taking a different path to address our unfair and frankly broken tax structure in Washington State. That doesn't do everything we need to accumulate to deal with the accumulated debt that many students have already taken on. Part of what that means is just addressing the other places in personal budgets that expenses are exploding, places like childcare, housing, healthcare. We need to be working on all of those pieces.
Thank you so much. And it seems that we did in fact manage to get Miss Alicia Rule into the call. Happy to have you. Sorry we missed you on the introductory part in the first question, but we're glad to have you throughout. So if it's all right, I'd like to also field this question to you. What actions will you take to address the massive college debt that students in our state face? And you have 90 seconds.
Yes, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I really am excited about some of the things that they just worked on that Representatives Shewmake and Ramel have just mentioned. As the first generation in my family to go to college, I know firsthand how important it is to have opportunity. And I really think that equal opportunity is something that our state legislature has a primary responsibility to do for our constituents. So I really do look forward to more availability to do opportunity creation like this. And I want to make sure that we have thought about everybody when we're thinking about this kind of legislation, that we've included all the folks in the 42nd District in Washington State while we're considering these things, so that everybody has the chance to make a choice to go to college if they choose to.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We'll jump to the next question now, which is, what actions will you take to address structural inequities and systemic discrimination at the state level? And Ms. Rule, we'll start with you. Great,
thank you. This is something that I've been working on my whole life. As a social worker, this is embedded in our code of ethics. And as somebody who came from the 42nd District, I grew up right outside of Linden. I didn't have a lot of experience with people of color or people who are different than me. And when I went to college, speaking of college, that's one of the things that I had a wonderful experience in, because I got to do a degree in American Ethnic Studies, and it changed the trajectory of my life and my career. I got to know a lot of people who are very different than me, and I have sought after opportunities to elevate their voices and look for what I like to think about as our blind spots. It's not just that we have a few bad apples, but that a lot of times what happens with racism is that we miss it. We miss it if we're, white people like me, we might not know because it's not our experience. But one of the things I'm really proud of is that I'm a very, very good listener, and I pay attention. And I look forward to bringing and elevating those voices in Olympia for us in this next session.
Thank you so much. We're going to jump over to Ms. Shewmake. Same question to you. What actions will you take to address structural inequities and systemic discrimination at the state level? And you have 90 seconds.
Yeah, so when we talk about systemic racism, we have to recognize that it's not just one thing. It happens in so many sectors of our economy. I just finished putting together a lecture for my urban economics class on housing segregation and why do we see housing segregation and what are its impacts. And there's a long history of housing segregation. Zoning was a tool explicitly written by people who were open segregationists to try and make sure that we didn't have Black and white people, mixing too much, right? Horrors, to look like a room like our Zoom room. And so when we look at it, housing is definitely on the table. Thinking about density, thinking about minimum lot sizes, that's a way to ensure that only rich people can live in a neighborhood by saying that your lot has to be a certain size. And so let's make sure that we're allowing our communities to be a little bit more mixed, a little bit more diverse. As a member of the business school faculty, we're hearing from businesses that they want graduates who know how to work in diversity and how to think through that. We also have to look at it into our hiring decisions, both at the state level, but also at protections for folks. We passed a bill last session, that may not sound like a big deal, but it actually is a big deal. And that was prohibitions on discriminating against women for their hair. And so I had an African-American roommate in college, and I wake up and I'm like, whatever, I'm ready to go. And she spent a lot of time on her hair because natural hair wasn't viewed as professional enough, right? And so we can't have that happen. And I wouldn't have known to bring that bill up, but we have an incredible Black caucus who did bring that bill up. And so another thing that we also created was the
Sorry to cut you off. That was 90 seconds. And then Mr. Dzialo, you go ahead and round out the question. Same question to you. What actions will you take to address structural inequities and systemic discrimination at the state level? And you have 90 seconds.
So I believe that the old term of redlining is definitely something we need to do away with completely. Everybody deserves to have the same amount of services regardless of their ethnicity, their race, their gender identity, their religion, whatnot. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I went to school through my whole education with a very diverse population, be it Latin American, be it African American, Asian. It's been a part. Diversity has been a part of my life throughout my existence. I have my youngest daughter is adopted, is biracial, and sometimes she's my favorite. and somebody actually told me that was social justice currency, and I think that's appalling. And as appalling in every business law class I've taken at graduate and undergraduate level, it's appalling that people still make these decisions to discriminate in hiring. I've hired people of all different ethnicities and citizenship statuses, and I mean that's just, it's appalling that people discriminate, and that should be something that should be weeded out. Although at the same time, we can't say that there's quotas that you have to look at this, because that just hurts everybody. We want to get the best people possible for the job, and if you are found to be discriminative, then that's a strike against you, and they should be removed from whatever position they're in and should not be in HR.
Thank you so much. And then the final question from me to you all is, what is your position on defunding law enforcement agencies? And Ms. Shewmake, will begin with you, 90 seconds.
Stefan, I didn't get a chance to answer the structural inequities question.
Oh dear, my apologies. Go ahead, same question to you. My apologies again. What actions will you take to address structural inequities and systemic discrimination at the state level?
Thanks, I appreciate it. We'd juggle things around with the order here. So I would just say that, dealing with these structural inequalities and systemic racism isn't one bill that we're going to pass next year. It's not a suite of bills. It's got to become part of everything that we're doing in Olympia. So when we pass a policy in Olympia, multiple stages in the process, people evaluate how much it costs, and we have to think about that at each stage. And I liken our need to confront inequity to the way that we evaluate cost. We need to be thinking about it at each stage of the process for every bill that we're dealing with. So last year we created a Washington State Office of Equity. We still need to fund it, but that's, I think, an important part of how we can be thinking about sort of the data underlying this, so we can get beyond just dealing with intentional discrimination and start dealing with the structural consequences of inequity. That's going to mean changes to our tax structure. I think it probably almost certainly means fully funding the Working Families Tax Credit. As Sharon Shewmake pointed out, it's housing policy. It means fully funding our schools. It means early childhood education. Sharon had a great bill on that last year. It means access to higher education and climate policy, like we talked about earlier. So I'm committed to it in all of those areas, and I'm committed to addressing those problems through the lens of the principle, nothing about us without us, because representation matters. And so we need those diverse voices in the room making those decisions.
Thank you so much. And my apologies again for missing you on that. So now, final question from me to you all. What is your position on defunding law enforcement agencies? Ms. Shewmake, we will begin with you, 90 seconds.
Yeah, so first of all, defund is a local discussion. The state legislature doesn't fund local police departments. It's kind of a city and county thing. But second, I've been saying for a while that we need alternatives to incarceration. So we need to think long and hard about what we think is a crime, and especially nonviolent drug crimes, right? And we've been doing this work for a while in the state legislature, removing offenses from the 3 strikes law. It was a big fight the first year we did it, and then the next year we made the process a little bit easier, and suddenly it sailed through. And so really thinking hard about what sentencing and what justice really means. How do we treat young people especially? Brains are just different when you're young versus when you're older. We see that when you're less than 25, you're more likely to take risks, and you may not always understand the consequences of your actions. Although I know all my Western students do. So some of the things that we're looking on policing, I wouldn't call it defunding, but we are looking at tightening up the decertification process. So if you get fired from one police department, if you get decertified, then you can't just go to the next police department. And of the 100 people that were fired in Washington State in 1 year, only 10 were actually decertified. That meant those other 90 people did something that got them fired, and then they could continue to go on. We'll be looking at a duty to report misconduct. We'll be looking at examining tactics. And one of my favorite things is we'll be looking at better data, because you measure what you care about. And right now, our data on what works in law enforcement is really bad, and we have to be able to do better.
Thank you so much. We'll go to Mr. Ramel. Same question. What is your position on defunding law enforcement agencies? And you have 90 seconds.
Thanks, Devin. So, part of this job is figuring out how to communicate complicated ideas and complicated policies as easily as possible and as simply as possible. And I've come to realize that different people mean very different things when they say defund the police. And some people mean that what we ought to be doing is sending more social workers to deal with non-emergency calls, and I absolutely agree with that. But some people hear that and they think you mean abolish the police, which is not a position that I support. So let me tell you what I think we should be doing. We absolutely need truly independent prosecution and investigation when there's an allegation that there's police misconduct. And as Sharon said, we have to focus on decertification when that misconduct is found. I heard today that out of about 100 cases of police firings last year, only 10 of those people are not currently working in Washington State. They were rehired in other law enforcement agencies. We got to deal with use of force, chokeholds, tear gas, et cetera. And in all of those things we have to deal with, we need better data collection for accountability. We're looking first at use of force, but also who gets stopped, who gets off with a warning, who gets searched, and we need data to be able to tell us whether there's equity in that. So police accountability and rebuilding our criminal justice system is not going to be a one-year project, but it's one that I'm committed to in the long term.
Thank you so much. Mr. Dzialo, same question to you. What is your position on defunding law enforcement agencies? And you have 90 seconds.
I support good cops. We do need to make sure that that they have the tools they need to get the job done, while at the same time getting extra services, social services involved when the need arises. I can remember as a young man, as a teenager, being almost wrongfully accused of something, being in the wrong place at the wrong time and being told to stand with my back to the street as somebody drove by to see if I was the suspect. And I can remember being robbed at gunpoint and having to go down and pick out the individual in a 6-pack, it was basically 6 pictures. The first time I didn't see anybody because I didn't want to wrongly accuse anybody. The second time I did ID somebody and had to go to court and point them out. So I can see both sides of the issue. And I also remember being on an EMT ride along in downtown Los Angeles and going into the ER and seeing a deputy posted outside of a bay in the ER, and a friend of mine who was on there with his rig, he said we had missed the commotion. It took 6 people to detain this person. He was so high on drugs that they had to use force to get them down. And so there's a need when use of force is warranted. But there is a time we could see, as far as in Minnesota, where putting your knee on somebody's throat is absolutely is too far. But we need to watch. We need to protect our great law enforcement officers and weed out the bad ones.
Thank you so much. And then Ms. Rule, to round out the question, what is your position on defunding law enforcement agencies? And you have 90 seconds.
Yes, again, I would agree with all the presenters here that defunding means a lot of things to a lot of people, but truly this is more of a city level issue, and I am on the city council now, so I think probably speaking to what I have done is more appropriate. I've worked really well side by side. We hired a new police chief who is a person of color, grew up in Ferguson, and came in and really did some good work in our police department, and I'm really proud of that. Ahead of much of the social uprising that's happened, including revamping our use of force policy and banning chokeholds. So I am proud of the work that I have done. I look forward to doing much side-by-side work like I have in the past as a social worker. So as a social worker, I don't believe that we should be taking law enforcement jobs or doing their jobs or having them do our jobs, but we need to work side by side with one another. I've worked a long time in teams with law enforcement, and that's really what we need to do. But essentially what we need to do is we need to build a better mental health system and increase those social services. And that's really my area of expertise. It's the area I've worked my whole life, decades in, and I look forward to bringing that experience and those stories of the folks to the legislature so that we can build a better mental health system for all of Washington State.
Thank you so much to all of you. That's all of the questions that I have. We're moving on now to our Q&A segment where the audience can submit questions. There's a little Q&A box down on the corner, or just at the bottom little access strip on the Zoom call. Some people have actively been throwing them into the chat as we've presented, which all of the candidates have actually been pretty good at responding to, and I commend you for that. There was a question a bit earlier on though, about the question for all of you, and you'll have a minute to answer this each, is what work will you do to address the looming eviction crisis and to ensure that citizens have access to affordable housing? And it will be 60 seconds each. I just have to pull my timer back up. And then we will go ahead and start with Mr. Ramel.
Thanks, Stefan. So I would start just with the work that I have been doing. This has been a priority for me this last year. Sharon and I and my seatmates are on a call with the governor's team once a week to just sort of check in on issues. And this is an issue that I bring up on almost every one of those calls. And I've been advocating for extensions to the eviction moratorium at each point that it's been necessary. And I helped to bring together a group of more than 40 representatives and senators to send a letter to the governor asking for an increase in funding for rental assistance this summer. The governor responded to that letter by increasing the funding allocated from the CARES Act to more than $100 million. And a lot of that money got prioritized for people of color, and especially undocumented folks who didn't qualify for other CARES Act funding. I'm going to keep doing that work. This is an absolute critical priority for me.
Thank you so much. And then we'll go to Mr. Dzialo. Same question to you. What work will you do to address the looming eviction crisis and to ensure that citizens have access to affordable housing? And you'll have 1 minute.
Well, everybody deserves a home. Everybody deserves a safe home. So we do need to make sure to protect this people from getting thrown out on the street. Some of that work also needs to be protect the mortgages, those properties that still have mortgages. So the banks are the ones who pretty much might not be hurting as much as most of us are. So maybe, the banks could take a little bit of a cut for all of us to save so that property owner isn't out because they're basically that may be their only property, that may be their nest egg. So we don't need them to lose their nest egg because they're having grace and being able to not throw somebody out for not paying rent. So we need to watch that. Having extra money, I think we're running out of money. So that's really a tough thing, but we're all in this together. We can find solutions to make sure that, the banks aren't be the one that's the top less than 1% of people are profiting, and stop that and help everybody out.
Thank you so much. Ms. Rule, same question to you. What work will you do to address the looming eviction crisis and to ensure that citizens have access to affordable housing?
Yes, well, I think that we're really talking about is an economic recovery package. So it's not going to be one answer to a complicated issue. It's going to be looking at all systems and how they work together. People need to be able to work, and they need to be able to work safely. So that's part of the thing that I look forward to doing, is to making sure that we keep our workers safe and that we create economic opportunity and that we can get our economy rolling again, and we can do that in a safe way. I'd love to be able to support small businesses better. They were largely left behind in this crisis. And we also need to work hard to bring good paying jobs here so people could get back to work right away, but do it safely. I'd love to see more manufacturing jobs here, including manufacturing PPE. And we need to continue to work on getting the cost of healthcare and prescription drugs lowered so that people can afford to pay their rent and their mortgage. We also want to protect the Housing Trust Fund.
Thank you so much. And then Ms. Shewmake, to round off the question, what work will you do to address the looming eviction crisis and to ensure that citizens have access to affordable housing? You have 1 minute.
Yeah, so I was just on the radio. I heard earlier that 1 in 3 Americans are faced with losing their home either because of eviction or foreclosure. That's unacceptable. I'll be honest, where this should be coming from is the federal government. This should be, we bailed out the airlines, we bailed out all these big companies. We need to bail out people in their homes. And when you look at what happens with the eviction crisis, some of these big landlords are big banks that can handle it, but some of them are retired couples that put their savings into the house next door because it was a good deal and they could fix it up. And so it doesn't make sense why they miss out on their funds, but if they bought stocks, it wouldn't have, right? So there's kind of a fundamental unfairness. So ideally what happens is the federal government bails them out. We bail out all these other companies. But if not, we will be looking at economic recovery packages, because I don't know if we'll be able to have a federal government that we can really rely on as a state.
Thank you so much to all of you for answering that. For timing purposes, it's going to be the only question that we really have time to answer. And I'd like to give all of you 1 minute for a closing statement, and we'll go in the same order. So Mr. Ramel, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Stefan. Thanks for coordinating this, and again to the associated students for pulling this together. I would just reflect. I'm coming up on the first year as a state representative, and I would just say that legislating is a team sport. It takes good partners, and I'm really grateful for the partners we have. They weren't able to be here today, but Representative Deb Lukanoff, State Senator Liz Lovelich are my partners here in the 40th District. Working with Sharon Shewmake on the other side of Bellingham and the rest of Whatcom County is a real pleasure, and I can't wait to work with Alicia Rule in this coming year. We've got a lot of challenges in front of us, and with your help, we can send Democrats to solve them. We just need the students to show up and vote. I started off emphasizing that, and would just really reiterate the importance of getting your ballots turned in and voting the whole ballot so that we can have representation that really reflects our community's values. Thanks.
Thank you. And then Mr. Dzialo, just a quick closing statement, 1 minute from you.
I will. Thanks for the time, and it's been great to interact with students at Western. I will begin to saying I said we need to send Republicans to office, because we are going to be the ones that are going to say less. We don't want to cut. We don't want to raise taxes on anyone. We need to cut out the waste in government to where the people who need it can be helped. We want to be able to work. We need to protect businesses of all sizes, small and large. Large businesses support the small businesses. We need to get people back to work, rebuild our economy, ensure that everybody is treated fairly, and have a just free. We need to be free. We don't need mandates. We don't need our big brother to tell us what to do at every step of the way. That's maybe we always say it's the biggest decision of our lifetime, and finally it might actually be that way. So I bring a more of a balanced approach. I will challenge my party to make sure that they do the right thing, and make sure that we can win. We can all win, not just one person winning.
Thank you so much. Ms. Rule, 60 seconds for a closing statement.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, again, I would love to be able to take the opportunity to bring my experiences as a social worker, which comes with the stories. Those are the stories that I've collected over the years of your hardest moments and on your worst day. Those stories with people that don't have a lobbyist and don't have big, powerful people speaking for them in Olympia are the ones that I want to go work hard for. And maybe there's some of yours. I have worked very hard on the Blaine City Council to bring opportunities to folks and to our community and to serve. And that's the same kind of attitude that I will bring to us in Washington State at the state level, that I am here to serve you as our community and to be your voice so that we can create opportunities for everyone in an equitable way to improve the lives of those in the 42nd and in Washington State. Thank you for the time today.
Thank you so much. And then Ms. Shewmake to round out the segment, 60 seconds for a closing statement.
Yeah, so we have a federal government in chaos right now. There is no way you could pay me to go work in Congress or in the administration right now. It looks like nothing gets done and it's infighting all the time. And not only that, but the institutions that we've built over time that usually keep our nation stable are being systematically dismantled. And so with changes to the Supreme Court, we don't know if women are going to have the right to choose anymore, or if LGBT folks are going to be able to come out about who their family is and who they love, right? And so it becomes all the more important to look at these state legislative races, partially to keep Washington safe, to keep it a place that we feel that we can love each other and be who we are and have a kind government, but also because I think we can be a leader. I think we can be a leader on racial justice and criminal justice reform. I also think that we can be a leader on climate change by showing that you can have a climate policy that is cost effective and is politically popular, and that gets other states to adopt it as well. And so I want you to elect people who come to the table with solutions. And I think that's me and Alicia and Alex. Sorry, Russ.
Thank you so much to all of you, Mr. Ramel, Mr. Dzialo, Ms. Rule, and Ms. Shewmake. Thank you all for joining us. To anyone watching who'd like more information on them, we'll put the links to all of their respective websites in the chat. And then next up, my co-moderator, Natalie, will be speaking with the candidates for State Supreme Court, and we'll get that started here in just a moment.